Not something simple, not something you'd laugh off with a shrug, but something that clung to the edges of your reality, twisting it, warping it, making everything you thought you knew feel like a lie. Noah Harper wasn't a paranoid man. In fact, most people would call him grounded, reliable, maybe a little too by the book. He paid his taxes early, sorted the recycling without being asked, and never forgot to call his mom on Sundays. And when he met Claire, the artist with wind in her hair and stories in her eyes, he swore he'd stepped into a world he didn't deserve but never wanted to leave. She was different, the kind of different that makes you slow down when she speaks. She saw meaning in the most ordinary of things, a coffee stain on napkin, the rhythm of thunderstorm, the silence between two people who no longer know what to say. They had been married for 5 years, and for most of that time, Noah truly believed he knew her. Not just the way she liked her eggs or the fact that she cried during nature documentaries, but really knew her like you know a song you've played 100 times. Every note, every pause, every skip in the melody. But lately, something was off. It started small, a hesitation in her smile, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes when he asked, "You okay?" The kind of changes most people would miss. But Noah didn't miss things. That was his curse. It was one Wednesday morning, gray skies pressed low against the city, that Noah noticed Claire locking the bathroom door. That in itself wasn't strange, except she never used to. They were the kind of couple who had stopped knocking years ago. Privacy wasn't something they tiptoed around. It simply wasn't necessary. But that day, as she stepped into the bathroom with their golden retriever Scout trotting beside her, she turned the lock. Noah heard the distinct click as he poured coffee. He paused, mug in hand, staring at the door like it had betrayed him. Scout had always been by Claire's side. From the day they adopted him at the shelter, the dog had attached himself to her like a shadow. He followed her from room to room, sat beside her while she wrote, waited outside the grocery store like a sentinel. Loyalty, they said, devotion. Noah thought it was sweet, even comforting. But now it was different. She didn't just bring Scout into the bathroom. She wouldn't shower without him. And she locked the door. Every time. At first, Noah laughed it off. She just feels safer with him there, he told himself. Claire had always been a little jumpy when he wasn't around. She hated storms, slept with a night light even as an adult. Maybe Scout made her feel protected. Still, something gnawed at him. A few nights later, Noah passed the bathroom on his way to their bedroom. The door was closed, locked, water running. But then he heard it, soft, barely audible, a whisper. It was Claire's voice, but not her usual voice. It was low, urgent, intimate, like she was comforting someone or begging them. Noah froze. He leaned in, heart pounding in a way that felt disproportionate to the moment. Pressed his ear to the wood. The water masked most of it, but then, clear as day, he heard, "You're safe here. I've got you." And just like that, the breath left his lungs. Who was she talking to? He stood there for nearly a full minute, unmoving, brain racing. Then, the door handle jiggled. Noah snapped backward, pretending to be mid-step as Claire opened the door. She emerged wrapped in a towel, her dark hair clinging to her shoulders, Scout following closely behind. She smiled. "Hey," she said casually. Noah blinked. "Hey." She looked normal, relaxed. Scout trotted past him like nothing had happened. Noah nodded, managing a small smile. "Hey." But inside, something was shifting. He started noticing patterns. Every shower was the same. Claire and Scout. Door locked. Whispers. Noah thought about asking, directly. But every time he tried, the words felt ridiculous. "Hey, babe, why do you talk to the dog in the bathroom?" She'd laugh, tease him, or worse, be hurt. And yet, the image kept replaying in his mind. "You're safe here." It wasn't just a sentence. It was a plea. That night, as he lay in bed beside her, Noah stared at the ceiling in silence. Claire's already asleep, or pretending to be. Scout curled at her feet, as usual, breathing steady, paws twitching in dream. The bedroom was quiet, save for the soft hum of the heater and the occasional car passing outside. But Noah's mind wasn't quiet. He thought about her eyes lately, the way they seemed to drift, like she was somewhere else even when she was next to him. He thought about how Scout never let her out of his sight. Not like a pet, but like a nurse, a guardian. He thought about that whisper, and the way it made his skin crawl with a fear he didn't understand. And he thought, what if I don't know her at all? The next day, he left work early. He made up an excuse about a system outage. No one questioned it. At the electronics store, he bought a small security camera, no bigger than a matchbox. Wireless, easy to hide. He told himself it was temporary, just until he had answers, just until the unease stopped chewing at the back of his skull. When he got home, Claire was in her studio, music playing softly, Scout curled at her feet. She waved as he walked by. Hey, babe. Noah smiled, waved back, just grabbing a drink. His hand trembled slightly as he slipped the camera into the bathroom mirror frame. That night, he couldn't sleep. Claire dozed off beside him, unaware. Scout's breathing filled the room with rhythm. Noah stared at the app on his phone. The camera was live, waiting. His stomach churned. He hated himself for doing it, but not as much as he feared not knowing. And that was the beginning of the truth. It started with a whisper behind a locked door. But what came next was silence. The kind that creeps in slowly, that seeps into corners, that hums beneath the rhythm of everyday life. Noah didn't talk about the camera. He told himself he needed more time, needed proof, needed to know that what he saw, or didn't see, would justify the gut feeling that had grown like a splinter in his chest. But before the camera ever showed him anything, Claire did, not with her words, but with everything else. They lived on a tree-lined street just outside Portland, where the autumn leaves gathered like confetti at the curbs and the smell of roasted coffee clung to your clothes. It was the kind of neighborhood people dreamed of. Safe, polished, predictable, and it suited Noah perfectly. He loved routine, the clean lines of order, the calm predictability of structure. And Claire? Claire was the color outside his lines. She had a kind of gentle, chaotic magic about her, the kind that made you believe in things you'd long stopped believing in. She filled their house with books, antique globes, and teacups that didn't match. She left post-it notes with doodles on the fridge. She always had ink on her hands, tangled hair, and an idea in her head that she couldn't wait to chase. She wrote children's books, and every story she published had a little version of her tucked inside. A curious fox, a wide-eyed girl, a brave little storm cloud who refused to disappear. And Scout. Scout was always there, curled beside her desk like a loyal comma at the end of every sentence. But lately, Noah couldn't ignore it. Claire was unraveling. At first, it was subtle. She left the hallway light on overnight, even though she used to insist on pitch black. She'd forget where she put her tea, letting it grow cold by the window while she stared into the distance, eyes unfocused. Then it got worse. One Friday evening, Noah walked into the house after work and immediately sensed something was wrong. The air smelled burnt. Not quite smoke, just the bitter edge of something left too long. He stepped into the kitchen and saw the pot, scorched on the bottom, its contents turned to tar. The oven was still warm. He called out, "Claire." No answer. He moved through the living room, heart picking up pace. That's when he saw her, curled on the couch in the dim light, knees to her chest, hair sticking to her damp forehead. Scout lay half on her lap, his large head resting heavily across her thighs, eyes fixed on her face. Claire wasn't asleep. She was somewhere else. Noah crouched beside her slowly, careful not to startle her. "Claire," he said softly. She blinked, slowly, as if surfacing from deep underwater. "Oh," she breathed, her voice thin. Then she smiled, but not the smile he knew. This one didn't reach her eyes. It trembled at the edges like it might fall apart if she held it too long. "Sorry, I must have spaced out. Just tired. Tired. That word. Again." But Noah had seen Claire tired. Tired was messy buns and yawns mid-sentence. Tired was blankets, movies, and cocoa. This wasn't tired. This was haunted. Over the next few weeks, the signs multiplied. Claire started forgetting things she never used to. She left the laundry half done. She didn't answer the phone when her sister called. Once, she left the front door unlocked all night. Noah found it slightly open at 6 a.m., the cold air whispering in, the hallway light still flickering. Scout sat near her as always, head against her shin like a weighted blanket. Noah stood in the doorway, not moving, just watching. Her hands were trembling, her breathing shallow. The house was quiet, but inside him, everything screamed. He wanted to ask her. He wanted to sit her down and say, "Claire, something's wrong. I see it. I feel it. Please let me in." But instead, he just watched. He watched how Scout never left her side. He watched how she flinched at sudden noises, sounds that never used to bother her. A dropped fork, a slammed car door. He watched her eyes, how they no longer followed the world but drifted inside themselves, like she was keeping a secret even from herself. One night, they were lying in bed. The lamp was still on. Claire had started sleeping with the light on again, like she used to when they first moved in. Noah turned on his side, facing her. She was staring up at the ceiling, expression blank. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just thinking. About." A pause. Then, "A story I'm writing." But there was no notebook beside her, no laptop on the nightstand. She hadn't written in weeks. That was when Noah realized something deeply unsettling. Scout wasn't just following Claire. He was watching her, studying her. He wasn't her pet. He was her partner, her protector. And whatever he was protecting her from wasn't outside the house. It was inside. Noah started paying attention the way he used to when they first met, when everything she said felt like a puzzle worth solving. He noticed how her hands curled into fists when the doorbell rang, how she hesitated before entering small rooms, how she whispered under her breath when no one was around, words he couldn't hear, but Scout always could. Sometimes Noah would walk into a room and find Scout sitting beside her, not playing, not resting, just being there, pressing against her legs, making sure she stayed upright. Noah watched all of it and said nothing, but the silence was getting louder. One morning, as she stood in the kitchen making toast, Claire dropped a glass. It shattered, and she froze. Not in surprise, not in frustration, in fear. Her shoulders locked, her breath caught, her eyes went wide. It took Noah 2 full seconds to realize she wasn't breathing. He moved toward her, hands out. "Claire!" She blinked and gasped like she'd come up for air. Scout was already beside her, nudging her calf. She crouched to his level, buried her face in his neck. Noah watched her body tremble. She whispered something into Scout's fur that Noah couldn't hear. That night, as he lay in bed, listening to the rain press against the windows, Noah felt it. The distance, not the kind that happens after a fight or over time, but the kind that grows in silence, that curls up in secrets. She was lying inches away, but it might as well have been miles. And the only one who knew how far she'd gone was the dog curled at her feet. It was the kind of shift you only notice when you stop trying to explain it away. Noah had spent the last few weeks convincing himself that Claire was simply tired, that she was just burnt out or uninspired, or maybe even fighting something internal she didn't have words for. But there comes a moment, quiet, sharp, when suspicion is no longer a stranger. It becomes a resident in your home. It sits across from you at breakfast. It watches your spouse when they think you're not looking. And worst of all, it whispers. What if you don't know the truth? Because they don't want you to. That thought, ugly, unwanted, had started to take root in Noah's mind. He hated it. He hated himself for having it. But he couldn't deny it anymore. Scout had become more than Claire's companion. He was her mirror, her shadow, her pulse check. Noah started noticing the pattern. The dog wasn't reacting to her. He was anticipating her. The way he positioned himself between her and doorways. How he nudged her back when she lingered too long in tight spaces. How his ears would twitch seconds before Claire would falter. One afternoon, Claire had gone upstairs to fold laundry. Noah sat at the bottom of the stairs pretending to read, but really, he was listening. He heard nothing at first. Then, a thump. Not loud, not alarming, but followed by silence. Long, eerie silence. And then, the faint creak of Scout's paws as he trotted up after her, claws tapping lightly on hardwood. Noah held his breath. He didn't know what bothered him more, the fact that Claire hadn't called out, or the fact that Scout had somehow known to go. Then came the evening that unraveled him. It was past 10. Rain whispered against the windows. The house was still. Claire said she was going to take a shower. Noah, seated on the couch, nodded and tried to focus on his laptop, but every sound from upstairs felt amplified. The creak of the bathroom door, the click of the lock, and then the water. At first, it was white noise, just background. But then, something else emerged. A sound layered beneath the rush of water. Subtle, muffled. Noah stood. Each step up the stairs felt heavier than the last. Not because of fear, but dread. The kind that doesn't announce itself with horns, but tiptoes in uninvited. He paused just outside the bathroom door and heard her voice. "It's happening again. Just stay with me." Her words were barely audible. A whisper meant only for one pair of ears. Noah's blood chilled. She wasn't on the phone. She wasn't talking to herself. She was talking to Scout. Or someone else? The thought crawled through him like ice. His first instinct was to knock, to say her name, to pull open the door and demand an answer. But he didn't. He stood there, frozen in a place between husband and stranger. Because even as his hand hovered over the doorknob, something inside him whispered, "You're not supposed to be part of this." And he didn't know what that meant. That night, Claire came to bed quietly, her hair damp, eyes unreadable. Scout climbed up after her, settling at her feet, as always. She kissed Noah on the cheek. He smiled, but something had changed. A line had been drawn, not with words or arguments or locked doors, but with silence. And in the quiet that followed, Noah realized the most painful truth of all. He was no longer her safest place. The guilt came next. It showed up before the decision. It wrapped itself around his thoughts like vines, choking off reason, planting doubts. But the doubt had already bloomed into something darker. He couldn't sleep, not with her lying inches away, whispering to a dog as if he held the key to her survival. Not with Scout watching him from the foot of the bed, eyes open, alert, like a guardian, like a secret keeper. Noah had always trusted Claire. Not blindly, not foolishly, but deeply, and he'd earned that trust in return. Or so he thought. But trust isn't always stolen. Sometimes it fades. The next day, while Claire went out for a walk, Noah did something he never thought he'd do. He went into the bathroom with a purpose that felt foreign. He stood in front of the mirror, holding a tiny box no bigger than a matchbook, a black wireless security camera. He turned it over in his hands, staring at the blinking red light like it might blink back. "This isn't who I am," he muttered to no one. But the reflection didn't argue. He found a spot behind the vanity mirror, just enough visibility to capture the shower encounter. Not enough to be obvious. He mounted it, quick, clean, quiet, then walked out and stood in the hallway. The whole thing took 6 minutes, but it felt like a betrayal that would echo forever. Later that night, Claire curled next to him on the couch, reading, or pretending to. Noah couldn't stop looking at her hands. They were fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. She always did that when she was anxious. She thought he never noticed, but he always did. He had memorized her, every nervous tick, every look she gave before telling a white lie. And now she was hiding something big enough that she needed locked doors and a dog to hold it in. They didn't speak much that night. The TV played something light, the kind of show with Ken laughter and two bright apartments. Claire leaned into him at one point. He stiffened, then instantly hated himself for it. She pulled away slightly. Noah reached for her hand, held it tight. She squeezed back, but neither of them meant it. He lay awake that night, eyes open, the ceiling above them feeling miles high. He could hear her breathing, soft, even. Scout's too. But beneath the stillness was the hum of something waiting. The camera was live, recording, connected to an app on his phone. One click away, Noah turned over, careful not to wake her, and stared at the black screen of his phone. He didn't check the feed. Not yet. Part of him still hoped the camera would prove him wrong, that the whispering was harmless, that the distance was temporary, that she would come back to him on her own. But another part, the darker part, it already knew. The next morning, Claire was humming in the kitchen. Scout sat at her feet, eyes locked on her every movement. Noah sat across the counter, watching her toast bread with the absent rhythm of someone going through the motions. She hadn't asked how he slept. He hadn't asked what she dreamed. They were talking, sure, but not to each other. When she left the room, he finally opened the camera app. The live feed flickered to life. The bathroom. Empty. It was eerie, somehow, seeing the space without her in it. Clean counters. Steam-streaked mirror. The absence of a truth he hadn't yet witnessed. But he would. He knew it. That afternoon, Claire sat by the window, reading again. Scout curled beside her, chin on her leg. Noah watched them from the hallway. From the outside, it looked peaceful, beautiful even, but Noah saw what no one else would have. Claire wasn't reading. She hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. Her eyes were still, her breathing shallow, and Scout, his ears were twitching, muscles tense, watching her like a soldier waiting for the next battle. Noah's phone buzzed. A notification from the camera. Motion detected. He looked up. Claire stretched slightly. "I think I'll take a shower," she said, voice barely above a murmur. Noah's heart hit his ribs. He nodded. "Okay." She stood, Scout rising immediately, tail low but wagging gently. And just like that, they disappeared upstairs. Noah waited for the door to close, for the lock to click, for the truth to begin. Claire stretched, arms reaching toward the ceiling as sunlight spilled gently across the hardwood floor. "I think I'll shower before lunch," she said, voice soft, almost casual. But to Noah, it sounded like a starting pistol. His pulse began to climb. His mouth went dry. He barely looked up from his phone, pretending to scroll, pretending to breathe normally. "Okay," he managed, voice steady. But inside, everything was screaming. Claire disappeared up the stairs, Scout trotting after her like always, quiet, loyal, alert. And when the door clicked shut, Noah finally moved. His phone was already open to the app. The interface was simple, live feed. One device, one room. He tapped in. The camera hummed to life. And, suddenly, he wasn't in the kitchen anymore. He was in the bathroom, with her. At first, everything seemed ordinary. Claire entered the frame, slowly, shoulders slouched. Her movements lacked rhythm, like her limbs were made of wet fabric. She leaned over the counter, turned on the water. Steam began to rise. Scout sat near the door, motionless, but his eyes fixed on her. Noah watched from the other side of the screen. His hands gripped the edge of the kitchen table, knuckles whitening. Claire unbuttoned her blouse, folded it, removed her jeans. She moved as if underwater, deliberate, heavy. Every part of her body language spoke one thing: exhaustion. Not the kind from a sleepless night, but the kind carried over years. Noah had never seen her like this. He felt intrusive, wrong, but he didn't look away, because something was coming. He could feel it. And then, Scout stood. No hesitation, no command, just action. Scout padded toward the bathroom counter. His steps were soft, almost reverent. His golden coat shimmered in the fog-filtered light. He reached the vanity, sniffed once, and then gently, almost delicately, he gripped something in his mouth. A small orange bottle. He turned, walked it over to Claire. Noah leaned closer to the screen, heart now hammering so loud he could barely hear. Claire saw the bottle. Her entire body stilled. She reached out, hands trembling, like the object was made of glass and grief. "Good boy," she whispered. "You always know." The way she said it, tender, broken, hit Noah like a gut punch. Claire unscrewed the cap, her fingers clumsy, tipped a small white pill in her palm. No water, no hesitation. She swallowed it dry, and then leaned on the sink, both hands braced against the porcelain as if it was the only thing holding her together. Her head lowered. Her shoulders shook barely, subtly, but enough. Noah stared at the screen, not breathing. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even confused. He was shattered, because this wasn't some betrayal. This was something else, something worse. She had been fighting this alone, and the only one who knew was the dog lying at her feet. The footage ended, but Noah didn't move. The screen went dark, just a dim reflection of his stunned face. But in his chest, a tidal wave of guilt, of realization, of every damn thing he hadn't seen. He stood slowly, as if the weight of what he knew had changed the pull of gravity itself. Walked to the sink, turned on the faucet, let cold water rush over his hands while the world inside him cracked open. He didn't confront her that day. What could he say? "Hey, I saw you take a pill your dog gave you, and I've been spying on you." No, No, that wasn't the conversation she needed. That wasn't the version of himself he wanted her to see. So he waited. But the waiting felt like slow suffocation. He couldn't unsee it. The trembling, the whisper, the fact that it wasn't just medication. It was ritual. It was survival. That night, as Claire slept beside him, her breathing slow and Scout curled faithfully at her feet, Noah lay wide awake. Not just watching her, studying her. And suddenly, everything made sense. The lights left on? Not forgetfulness. They were lifelines. Small comforts in the dark. The locked doors? Not secrecy. Safety. From a fear she hadn't named. The dazed stares. The blank moments. The sweat at her hairline in an air-conditioned house. She wasn't being careless. She was managing something. And doing it quietly. Gracefully. With the help of a dog who understood her body better than he did. Noah slipped out of bed before dawn. The living room was still, painted blue in the early morning. He opened his laptop. Typed in the name he remembered from the pill bottle. Clonazepam. Enter. And there it was. Anticonvulsant. Benzodiazepine. Prescribed for anxiety. Panic disorders. PTSD. Seizures. Side effects. Fatigue. Disassociation. Difficulty focusing. Claire. Every line read like a profile of the woman he had watched unravel. And beneath each medical fact was another blow to the chest. Because she hadn't told him. And he, her husband, hadn't noticed. He leaned back in his chair, eyes glassy. The coffee table in front of him blurred. He was remembering things now. Moments that had once seemed ordinary. Like the time she froze in the elevator of their hotel in Chicago. He thought it was motion sickness. Or the afternoon she sat shaking in the back seat of the car after the parking garage arm jammed and trapped them inside for 4 minutes. He had laughed. We'll just back out. No big deal. But she hadn't laughed. She hadn't spoken. He remembered now how she'd clutched her seatbelt like it was a rope. How Scout, riding in the back, had climbed into the front and pressed against her until she stopped trembling. Noah thought he was comforting her. But it wasn't him. It was always Scout. Claire came into the living room around 8 o'clock, her face sleepy soft, sweater draped loosely over her arms. Morning, she yawned, walking toward the coffee pot. Hey, Noah replied gently. She kissed his temple. He tried not to flinch from guilt. As she stirred cream in her cup, he watched her fingers. They were still trembling. Slightly. Subtle. But there. She sat on the couch, curling her feet beneath her. Scout settled in right after, his head once again finding its rightful place on her thigh. Noah watched them like a painting. A woman and her dog. But now he knew. He wasn't watching a moment of affection. He was watching a moment of dependence. Why hadn't she told him? Why had she kept it in? Why, despite everything they'd built, had she chosen silence? He didn't blame her. He blamed himself. Because maybe she thought he wouldn't understand. Or maybe he never gave her a reason to believe he could carry the weight. Maybe she'd been hiding in plain sight for months. And maybe he'd been too in love with the version of her who smiled at breakfast and wrote whimsical bedtime stories, to accept the version of her that needed help just to breathe in small rooms. That night, he made a decision. He wouldn't bring it up as a confrontation. He would invite her in, ask without pushing, listen without assuming. Because whatever secret she was carrying, he no longer wanted to be the stranger standing outside her locked door. He wanted to be the one waiting inside. It was raining the next evening. Not a storm, just a soft, steady drizzle. The kind that blurs the edges of the world and makes everything feel slower. Claire was on the couch, her legs drawn up, a blanket draped over her knees. An open book rested on her lap. But Noah could tell her eyes weren't moving. She wasn't reading. She was drifting. Scout lay beside her, head on her thigh, ears twitching slightly at the distant sound of thunder. Noah stood in the doorway to the kitchen, watching them. The ache in his chest felt sharp and warm and old, like a scar that had never fully healed. He walked over slowly, sat beside her, close enough to touch, far enough not to intrude. "Claire," he said gently. She looked up, startled, but her face softened when she saw his. "Hey," she said, managing a smile. "You okay?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. Her palm was cool, and trembling. She noticed it too, and started to pull away. But Noah held on. "I know," he said quietly. "You've been hiding something, and I'm not here to ask why. I'm just asking you not to hide it from me anymore." Claire froze. Her other hand tightened instinctively around Scout's fur. And for a moment, Noah thought she might deny it. Brush it off, smile, and change the subject. But then, her entire body sank, like she'd been holding up a wall for too long. Like the weight of hiding had finally become heavier than the fear of telling. She looked down at their intertwined hands. And then, her voice cracked. "I have claustrophobia." Noah didn't move. She went on, slowly, as if unlocking a box that had been nailed shut for years. "It started when I was a kid. My mom's boyfriend, he'd get angry. Real fast. Didn't even need a reason. One day I talked back. Just once. He locked me in the hallway closet for hours. No lights." Noah sat in the dark. Not because the lights were off, but because every corner of the world around him felt dimmer now. Claire had gone to sleep an hour ago. She had kissed him goodnight, like always. Soft, brief, automatic. Scout had curled up at the foot of their bed, just like every night before. But tonight, something was different. The dog's eyes didn't close. They stayed fixed on Noah, unblinking, heavy, knowing. It felt absurd, but under Scout's gaze, Noah felt, watched. Not with judgment, not with blame, but with understanding. As if the dog knew what Noah had seen. As if he knew that Noah, finally, painfully, understood what Claire had been hiding, not from malice, not from shame, but from fear. Noah slipped out of bed without a sound, tiptoed down the stairs and into the kitchen. The pill bottle from the footage was still burned into his memory. He opened his laptop, fingers trembling slightly on the keys. The blue glow of the screen was the only light in the room. He typed, "Lorazepam, purpose, dosage, side effects. Enter." What followed wasn't shocking. It was something worse, confirming. Used to treat anxiety disorders, panic attacks, and acute stress episodes. Also prescribed for short-term relief of severe claustrophobia. Can cause drowsiness, disorientation, emotional numbing. Noah swallowed hard. This wasn't recreational. This wasn't carelessness. This was management. Quiet. Controlled. Desperate. Claire had never told him, and that silence spoke louder than anything else. He sat there for a long time, thinking, not just about the pill, but about the stories she never told. The nights she whispered to Scout instead of him. The time she locked the door because the outside world was safer than the inside of her own body. And for the first time in their marriage, Noah felt truly ashamed. Not because she had hidden this, but because she'd felt she had to. It's funny, Noah thought, how memory changes when you know what to look for. Suddenly, his mind was a slideshow of every missed sign. Her reluctance to take elevators in hotels. The fainting spell in the basement of the art museum last summer. "It's just the heat," she'd said. The way her hands trembled when they got stuck in traffic inside a tunnel. How she clung to Scout like a lifeline in tight restaurants. Her insistence on showering only when he wasn't home. It had all been there, laid bare in plain sight. And he hadn't seen it. Because the version of Claire he loved, vivacious, dreamy, enchanting, didn't leave room for panic. Because the woman who wrote about magical trees and talking foxes couldn't possibly be the same woman who hid in locked bathrooms to escape the storm inside her own head. But she was all of that, and more. Noah leaned back, rubbing his eyes. His chest ached, not the sharp pain of betrayal, but the hollow throb of missed chances. He whispered her name into the quiet, even though she wasn't there to hear it. "Claire." It came out like an apology. Like a prayer. When he returned to their bedroom, Claire was still curled on her side. Her breathing was steady, soft. Her hair spilled across the pillow like ink on parchment. Scout lifted his head and watched Noah re-enter the room. His eyes followed him to the edge of the bed. Noah sat, let the silence wrap around him again. He didn't sleep. Not really. He just lay beside her, listening to her breathe, letting the weight of truth settle into his bones. By morning, the world felt unchanged, but Noah was not. As Claire stirred beside him, stretching lazily, he forced a smile. "Sleep okay?" she asked, voice rough with sleep. Yeah, he said, lying gently. You, better than yesterday. She kissed his cheek and moved toward the bathroom. Noah's breath caught. But this time, he didn't follow. Didn't check the camera feed. He just sat in bed, fists clenched into the sheets. Because the truth was no longer something he needed to prove. It was something he needed to carry. When she came back downstairs an hour later, Claire looked lighter somehow. Hair damp, coffee in hand. Wearing that old sweater she only wore on days she needed softness. Scout followed behind her, tail wagging softly, sensing the calm. But Noah knew it was temporary. Claire had become an expert in temporary. And today, he would tell her. She didn't need to be. Claire was flipping through the mail when Noah finally spoke. They were in the kitchen. Morning light stretched across the tile. Outside, the trees trembled in the early breeze. Scout lay curled near the door, eyes closed but not asleep. Always listening. Noah leaned against the counter, watching Claire sort envelopes with the kind of focus people gave when they were trying not to think about something else. "Can we talk?" he asked softly. Claire looked up. Her smile flickered, reflexive, cautious. "Sure," she said. "Everything okay?" Noah stepped closer. Not physically, emotionally. His voice was warm, but weighted. "I want to understand more. About you. About what you've been going through." Claire blinked. Her hand stopped moving. She placed the envelope down slowly. Her fingers lingered on it like it might anchor her to something stable. "Okay," she said again, quieter this time. "What do you want to know?" "Only what you're willing to tell me," Noah replied. "But I want to listen. I should have listened sooner." Claire's mouth opened. Closed. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear. Relief. Both. She turned toward him, arms folded loosely in front of her chest. A posture halfway between defense and surrender. "You noticed?" she whispered. Noah nodded. "I noticed a while ago, but I didn't want to believe what I saw. I thought it was just stress. Or distraction. I made excuses for what I didn't understand." Claire looked down. "That's okay," she said. "I made excuses too." They stood like that. Two people who loved each other deeply and completely, but hadn't spoken the same emotional language in months. Claire pulled out a kitchen chair and sat. Noah joined her. Between them, a simple wooden table, a coffee cup, and years of unspoken weight. "I was diagnosed 4 months ago," she began. "POTS. It's hard to explain. It's not just dizziness or fainting. It's like the control system in my body is broken. My heart rate, my blood pressure, my ability to just exist upright. It fails me, sometimes without warning." Noah nodded slowly, eyes never leaving hers. "And the claustrophobia?" he asked gently. She swallowed hard. "That's older. That's bone deep." She paused, fingers curling around the edge of her sleeve. "When I was little, my stepfather used to lock me in a closet. Not for long at first, but then it got longer, and darker, and quieter. I learned to hold my breath, to count, to pretend I was somewhere else." Her voice cracked. "And even now, all these years later, a small space, locked doors, can bring me back there in seconds." Noah felt his throat tighten. He reached across the table, palm open. Claire hesitated, then placed her hand in his. "I didn't tell you," she whispered, "because I didn't want to scare you, or make you think I was fragile." "You're not fragile," Noah said. "You're carrying things most people couldn't." Claire smiled faintly, eyes misted. "Scout knows when I'm about to spiral. He senses the spike in my body before I feel it. He brings the medication. He keeps me from collapsing. He's trained, but more than that, he's present." She looked down at the golden retriever, still resting near the doorway. "There were nights when I thought I might pass out in the shower. He was there. He pushed the door open when I was panicking. He lay against me until I could breathe again." Her voice broke again, softer than before. "Sometimes I talk to him because I didn't know how to talk to you." Noah's hand tightened around hers. "Talk to me now," he said. "I'm here." She looked up, tears streaming freely now, silent but unashamed. "I was afraid," she said, "that if I showed you this part of me, you'd leave. Or worse, you'd look at me differently. Not as your wife, but as someone to manage, to fix." "You don't need fixing," Noah said immediately. "You need someone who sees you. All of you, even the hidden corners." He stood, walked around the table, and knelt in front of her. His forehead rested gently against hers. "Let me see you," he whispered. "I'm trying," she replied. The moment passed in silence. But it wasn't empty. It was full of breath, of warmth, of years of love finally given a place to expand. Scout rose slowly and came to sit beside them, pressing his head between their knees. Claire laughed through tears, scratching behind his ears. "He's always in the middle of it, huh?" "Because he knows where he's needed most," Noah said. Claire took a deep breath. The kind of breath you only take when a room no longer feels like it's closing in. And for the first time in a long while, she looked okay. The next evening, the house was quiet. Not heavy or tense. Just quiet in that way that comes when two people are circling something unspoken. Claire sat on the couch, legs tucked under her, a book open in her lap. She wasn't reading. Her eyes were pointed at the page, but her mind was somewhere else. Scout lay beside her, head on her thigh, ears relaxed but still listening. Always listening. Noah stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her. The light from a nearby lamp bathed her in amber tones, softening the worry in her shoulders but not quite hiding it. He walked over and sat beside her. Not too close. Close enough to say, "I'm here." Not so close to say, "Talk now or else." He waited. Then he gently reached for her hand. It was cold. Not from the room. From something deeper. Her fingers were motionless at first, then lightly curled around his. Noah looked at her, not with demand, but with invitation. "Claire," he said quietly, "I know you've been hiding something. Not a confrontation. A confession of his own." Claire's eyes stayed on the page, then slowly lifted toward him. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Instead, she turned to Scout. Her hand found his fur like it always did when she needed grounding. And she whispered, barely loud enough to be heard, "I'm claustrophobic, Noah." The words weren't dramatic. They didn't land with a crash. They landed like a tear sliding down a cheek, soft, silent, inevitable. She took a breath, and her voice began to shake. "I wasn't always. When I was 8, my mom's boyfriend, Eric, he'd get angry when I talked too much, or laughed too loud, or moved too quickly." She paused. Noah said nothing, just squeezed her hand. Claire stared ahead, eyes on some invisible point across the room. "One day, I dropped a glass. It shattered. He didn't shout, didn't hit me. He just grabbed my arm and walked me to the hallway closet, pushed me inside, locked the door." Her voice cracked. "No light, no windows, just wood, and dark, and breathing. I screamed the first time, for an hour, but no one came." Noah's chest constricted. He did it again, and again. It became normal, like brushing teeth or bedtime. "But I never told my mom. I didn't want her to send me away." She wiped her cheek with the sleeve of her sweater. "I taught myself to count. Backwards. From 1,000. I taught myself to stop crying because crying used up too much air. I learned how to go somewhere else inside my head." A silence followed. Noah didn't speak, because sometimes silence is respect. Sometimes silence is the only way to make space for someone else's pain. Claire finally looked at him. Really looked. Her eyes were rimmed with tears, but wide open. "I can't be in small rooms alone. The silence, it brings it all back. The walls shrink. The air changes. I feel it in my spine before I even know what's happening." She pulled Scout closer. He didn't resist. "He keeps me tethered. When I start slipping, he brings me back." She swallowed, voice barely above a whisper now. "I didn't want you to think I was crazy." Noah felt something crack deep inside him. Not a break. A release. He reached for her other hand, held both of hers now between his palms. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question wasn't blame. It was longing. Claire inhaled. "Because I didn't want you to see me broken." Noah's response came instantly, instinctively. "You're not broken." He shook his head, fiercely tender. "You're surviving." Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she looked at him like she was seeing someone new. Or maybe like she was finally letting herself be seen. "And there's more," she said, her voice steadier now. "I have POTS." Noah nodded gently. "I know. I looked it up." Claire gave a small, surprised smile. "You did?" "Yeah, after I saw the meds. I couldn't pretend not to understand anymore." Claire exhaled slowly. "It's a disorder in my autonomic nervous system. When I stand up, my heart races. I get dizzy. Sometimes I faint. It's not constant, but it can happen anytime, especially if I'm dehydrated or anxious. She glanced at Scout. He senses it. He can smell when my cortisol spikes. He nudges me to sit, or lies across my legs. It looks cute, but it's medical. It saves me. Noah nodded. And all this time, you've been managing it alone. Claire tilted her head slightly, like she wasn't sure whether to agree or argue. I had Scout, but you didn't have me. That line hung in the air like smoke. Truthful, painful, undeniable. And it did what good truths do. It cleared the space for something better. The silence after Noah's words wasn't awkward. It wasn't empty. It was necessary. Claire stared at him like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. For the judgment. For the wince. For the subtle look of pity she'd seen on the faces of doctors, neighbors, even her own mother. But it didn't come. Noah just sat there, holding both her hands, steady as stone. His voice, when it came, was low and level. The voice of a man relearning how to hold a world he thought he already understood. I think I always knew there was something you weren't saying, but I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to open a door you'd already locked. Claire laughed, but it cracked halfway out of her throat. Funny. I thought if I opened it, you'd walk out. Noah shook his head slowly. No, I'd walk in. He looked at her like he was memorizing the moment, burning it into memory, holding it somewhere permanent. And if it takes learning how to be quiet in your quiet, or how to sit beside you when the world feels small, I'll learn. Claire blinked. Her face softened. Her shoulders lowered. It was the first time in weeks she hadn't looked like she was bracing for impact. She leaned back slightly, releasing a long, unfiltered sigh. The kind you only breathe when you know you won't be interrupted or corrected. Do you want to know the hardest part? She asked, almost like a secret. Always. It's not the fainting, or the meds, or the panic. It's the fact that I've spent so long pretending I'm okay. I forgot how to ask for help even when I need it. She looked at her fingers resting in his palms. It's like I built a house out of silence. And now I don't know how to live outside of it. Noah reached out, gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Then we'll build something new, together, out loud. Some conversations don't end. They dissolve. After that night, something shifted between them. Not in a cinematic way. No grand kiss. No swelling music. But in the way Claire sat a little straighter at breakfast. In the way Noah didn't flinch when Scout nudged her leg. In the way they started talking, not about symptoms, but about stories. The ones she used to write before her mind filled with fear instead of fairy tales. The ones he used to listen to as he fell asleep. The ones they hadn't made together in what felt like years. Noah began asking new kinds of questions. What do you feel in your body when a panic attack starts? What does Scout do that helps the most? When do you feel safest? They were questions born not from fear, but from respect. Claire didn't always have answers. Sometimes she didn't want to talk. Sometimes they just sat. And Noah learned that presence wasn't a word. It was a practice. He didn't try to fix her. He just stayed. And slowly, so did she. One afternoon, Claire stood in the kitchen, reaching for a plate on the top shelf. Noah watched her stretch, pause, and then wince slightly. She leaned against the counter. Scout immediately perked up, ears twitching, body ready to move. Noah stepped in, not in panic but in rhythm. You okay? He asked, his voice soft, his pace slower than instinct would have taken him months ago. Just lightheaded. She murmured, her hand on her forehead. I stood too fast. He didn't rush, didn't panic. He just reached for the glass of water already on the counter and handed it to her. She took it, drank, then looked up at him. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For not treating me like I'm going to break. Noah smiled, cupping her cheek. You're not fragile. You're just a fighter with a different battlefield. Scout wagged his tail, like he approved. That night, they sat on the back porch with mugs of tea in their hands. It was late. The wind had that early autumn chill, but neither of them wanted to go inside. Claire leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. You know, she said, it's strange. What is? All my life, I thought the goal was to stop being scared, to beat the fear, to cure the condition. But maybe the goal is just to learn how to keep living even when it hurts. Noah turned his head, kissed the crown of her hair. You've already been doing that. Yeah, she murmured. But now, I'm not doing it alone. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. Not because the world outside changed. The waiting room smelled like lavender and old books. Claire sat beside Noah, hunched slightly over clipboard. The pen in her hand moved quickly. Check marks, scribbles, pauses. She chewed on her bottom lip when she thought no one was watching. But Noah was watching. Not intrusively, not anxiously, just fully present. The kind of watching that says, I'm here, not to rescue, but to witness. He sat with his hands folded in his lap, heart doing that strange dance between guilt and hope. Guilt for all the things he hadn't seen. Hope for being there now, for what they might still become. The room was warm and quiet. Muted tones, soft lighting, nothing sharp or demanding. Exactly the kind of place where broken pieces could finally land without shattering further. Claire looked over at him, her eyes soft but alert. You good? She asked, her voice just above a whisper. Yeah, Noah said and meant it. He didn't know what healing looked like yet, but he knew what staying looked like, and he wasn't going anywhere. A door opened. A woman in her 50s, silver-streaked hair in a tidy knot, smiled kindly. Claire, she said. Claire stood, exhaled slowly. Noah squeezed her hand once before letting go. She disappeared into the hallway without looking back. But for the first time since this all began, Noah didn't feel like he was being left out. He felt like he'd been invited in, even if just to the edge. It wasn't until the third session that Dr. Howard, her voice calm and deliberate, looked Noah's way and said, I'd like to speak with you too. He nodded without hesitation. That night, he sat across from her in the same soft beige room, the windows partially open to let in the distant hum of traffic. Dr. Howard didn't waste time. Claire tells me you've been trying very hard to support her. Noah nodded. I am. She also told me about the camera. His eyes dropped to the rug. I know it was wrong, he said. I didn't know how to ask her what was going on. And I was afraid if I did, I'd break something I couldn't fix. Dr. Howard tilted her head. Sometimes people build walls to survive, she said. The question is, are you ready to help her take them down? Noah looked up. There was no judgment in her eyes. Only the quiet expectation that real things happen when people are willing to sit with discomfort. Yes, he said. I am. She nodded once. Then let's begin there. Over the next few weeks, the sessions became a rhythm. Claire continued her individual work, sometimes coming home with flushed cheeks, sometimes exhausted, sometimes almost glowing. And Noah began his own version of therapy. He wasn't there to process his trauma. He was there to learn how not to be scared of hers. He learned that trauma didn't need a villain to exist. That Claire's silence wasn't an absence of love. It was the echo of survival. That sometimes the hardest thing for a survivor isn't the pain itself, but trusting someone enough to let them see it. He learned about nervous system overload, about why sometimes she needed to cancel plans last minute without warning, about why Scout's presence wasn't just sweet, it was medical, tactile, essential. And he learned the hardest lesson of all. You don't get to decide how fast healing should move, Dr. Howard told him. But you do get to decide how still you're willing to be while it does. Noah stopped trying to be the answer. He became a mirror, a buffer, a presence. And slowly, something shifted in Claire too. One Saturday, Claire stood in the hallway, towel slung over her shoulder. She looked at the bathroom door for a long time. Then she turned to Noah, who sat on the bed reading. Can I ask you something? Anything. Would you stay nearby while I shower? Of course, he said immediately. Do you want the door closed? Claire hesitated, then shook her head. Just halfway. And so she showered, with Scout lying just outside the door and Noah seated on the bedroom floor, pretending to read, but mostly just waiting. There was no panic, no whispered affirmations, just steam, warm air, and a door left halfway open. It was one of the most intimate things they'd shared in months. Not because of proximity, but because of permission. It began with the little things. Claire leaving the bedroom door cracked at night. Noah learning how to ask before offering help. Scout easing his watchful presence, just enough to let Noah be part of the safety net. Healing didn't arrive with fanfare. It came like steam curling under a door, like sunlight slipping through the blinds, almost invisible until you paused and noticed you were breathing differently. Claire started reading again, not to distract herself, but to enjoy it. Noah stopped checking the live camera feed. In fact, he deleted the app altogether. She wrote a short poem one morning and left it on the fridge. Some days I still carry the storm inside me. But now I know. Someone is walking with me through the rain. Noah didn't say anything when he read it. But that night, he held her tighter than usual. In therapy, things began to shift too. Noah was no longer just a man holding her hand. He was a participant. Dr. Howard often directed questions to him now. When Claire starts to dissociate, what do you notice first? What are your internal reactions to her fear? Do you recognize the difference between helping and rescuing? And slowly, Noah began answering not with guesses, but with understanding. I used to think she needed me to step in, he said once. But now I know, she just needs me to stay. Claire, seated beside him, glanced over with wet eyes. That sentence meant more than he could know. One day, Dr. Howard asked them both, if trust is a room, what does it look like for you right now? Claire was quiet. She looked down at her hands. It's small, she said finally, but there's a chair in it, and a window. Dr. Howard nodded. And who's in the chair? Me, Claire said. And who's outside the window? A pause. Noah. But he's looking in, and I'm thinking about opening the door. Noah looked over. I'm not in a rush, he said. Take your time. Claire's lip quivered, but she smiled. I know. One afternoon, Noah came home early from work. Rain was coming down hard, slanted and cold. He stepped inside and shook off his coat, calling out, Claire? No response. The house was dim. Scout padded down the stairs, tail low, ears slightly back. That's when Noah felt it, the shift. That change in atmosphere he now recognized not as bad mood or off day, but as the static hum of survival mode. He walked up the stairs quietly. Claire was in the bathroom. The door wasn't locked. He peeked inside and found her sitting on the closed toilet lid, fully clothed, head resting on her knees. Her breathing was shallow. Scout sat in front of her, pressed close, unmoving. Noah didn't say her name. He just lowered himself to the floor, sat opposite her, quiet. Then slowly he extended one hand, not touching, just offering. Her eyes lifted, recognition. Then a flicker of something new. She placed her hand in his. He didn't speak, didn't move. They sat there in silence, fingers barely laced, while the rain tapped the windows like a memory asking to be let in. Later, she whispered, I thought I was slipping again. Noah replied, You can slip. I'll be here either way. Scout had always been between them. By necessity, by training, by instinct. But now something shifted. He started waiting outside rooms instead of pressing into them. When Claire stumbled, he no longer blocked Noah from reaching her. He began watching them both, not with vigilance, but with what felt like quiet approval. One night, after dinner, Claire looked down at him as he lay at her feet. He's not just helping me anymore, she said. He's letting you help too. Noah reached down, ran a hand through Scout's fur. The dog leaned into the touch and wagged his tail just once. It had been 5 months since Claire told Noah the truth. 5 months of therapy. 5 months of staying. 5 months of learning how to love each other. Not in spite of the fear, but through it. And on a crisp, cloud-brushed morning in early spring, Claire woke up before the alarm and whispered, I want to try something today. Noah opened one eye. What kind of something? She smiled. I want to go to the farmer's market. He blinked. Not because it was unusual, they used to go all the time, but because they hadn't since the diagnosis, since the unraveling. Are you sure? He asked gently. No, she said, stretching. But I want to try. By 9 a.m., she had dressed slowly, packed a water bottle, her emergency meds, a small snack, and, of course, Scout's vest. They didn't talk much on the drive, but her hand reached for his on the gear shift, and he didn't let go. The market was buzzing with weekend chatter and the smell of herbs and citrus. Claire kept close. Scout walked on her right, Noah on her left.